Docker Compose is a tool that helps you define and run your multi-container Docker applications. In this video, we are going to see how to use Docker Compose to spin up your apps, and we are going to see how it makes your task easy when it comes to spinning your multi-container applications. Let's move on to a computer screen and let's see Docker Compose in action. Alright guys, I'm inside my computer screen and let's start by creating a new Linode. So this is something that we'll definitely need. Now if you want to follow along with me and create the Docker container and everything, I strongly recommend that you grab the link in the description and claim your $100 60-day credit by creating a Linode account. This is an exclusive offer for you and you can create an account and receive $100 60-day credit, and this is valid for new customers only. So I strongly recommend you sign up through the link in the description so that you can exactly follow along the tutorial. I'm going to select the region as Chennai and we are going to create a dedicated 8 GB machine, so that we have everything in order, because we are going to install multiple Docker containers in a single machine. I highly recommend that you create a dedicated machine of maybe 64 GBs if you have more than say 100 containers of a small app running. But anyways, we are going to simply add a password. So let's add a password. I'm going to add a very simple password. So I just chose a very simple password, and now what we can do is simply click on create Linode. Alright, so after some time the Linode is provisioned. Now we can open the terminal and we can enter this machine. Now let us discuss first about why we need Docker Compose. First of all, you need Docker Compose when you have a lot of Docker containers. Let me explain why we need Docker Compose for managing a lot of Docker containers. Let us say you have a service and it simply consists of two containers. One container is a database container and the other container is simply the UI container. You can manually turn them on and off. You can manually play around with the containers. But let us say you have a service which has 100 containers. How would you take care of managing them? Let us say container 3 depends on container 25. Let us say container 3 is the UI, and for it to function properly, it needs container 23. How do you take care of the fact that container 3, if it needs container 25, the container 25 should run before container 3. So all this configuration and creation of network, and all of a sudden if you want to destroy all the containers, how do you do that? All this is taken care by Docker Compose. So we are going to first see how we can simply use Docker, and then we'll see how we can use Docker Compose to better manage a service which consists of a lot of Docker containers. So let's start by logging into the machine. So I'm going to copy this command and I'm going to paste it so that I can log into my machine. Yes. And I'm going to enter the password. And after entering the password, it says password denied. Let me try again, and yes. As you can see, I'm inside the machine. So if I type Docker, it is not installed. So we'll have to install Docker first. So I'm going to go to the Docker documentation and I'm going to copy this command for installing Docker in Ubuntu. And let's paste this command. But before that, let's do apt run update. Oops, apt update. And once I say apt update, it's going to update my package index. And after that, I'm going to install the Docker, and I'm using the documentation from Docker to install Docker. So let's wait for it to finish. It's done. So I'm going to use the Docker's official documentation to install Docker. So let's run these commands one by one. So I'm going to run this command next. Okay, let's copy this command, and let me copy all these commands at once. So you can basically set up Docker. It's really very easy. You can copy all these commands and it should be good to go. So let's run this and I should be able to install Docker after that. So I'm going to copy this command, the second step. Let's wait for it to finish. And I'm going to say yes. All right, let's wait. And once it is installed, we can test Docker's installation by going to docker run hello world, and then we are going to talk about Compose. So now that you can see Docker has been installed successfully, we can now talk about Docker Compose. Docker Compose will help you manage your Docker containers very effectively. How? We'll see. But before that, I'm going to run a very simple Docker container and another container. So the container 1 will use container 2 and it will run on a Docker network. And the container 1 will communicate to container 2 such that we will be able to see a multi-container application. So in order to kickstart, I'm going to start a Docker container, which is going to be a MongoDB container, and another container, which is going to be a Mongo Express container. The Mongo Express container is going to talk to MongoDB container so that we can create collections. It's basically like MongoDB Compass, but for the web. So let's start both the containers. So I am going to Google and I'll say MongoDB container, and then we'll say Mongo Express container. Let me say Docker, and I should get the Mongo image. And then I'll say MongoDB Express container Docker, and the Mongo Express official image is here. So this official image helps us connect to the MongoDB database. And then we have this Mongo container. It's MongoDB in a Docker container. So we are going to create a Docker network first. Docker network is simply used to create a network. So you can say Docker network create, and if you want to get the syntax, you can always get it from the official documentation. No need to remember anything, but again, it's really very simple. You can remember it. Okay, so let's run this command, and I'm going to say, let me copy this. I think I didn't copy this. So let's copy, and I'm going to say Docker network create MongoDB network, and we are going to create this network. It gives me a hash, and after I've created this network, I'll see this network. So if I do Docker network ls, I'll see this network. You can see that Mongo network is available. These are the default networks, but again, this is a network that we have created. All right, so the network is created. Now I'm going to spin two containers. One will be the Mongo container and the other will be the Mongo Express container, and these two containers will talk to each other. So let's now run the Docker container. So I'll say Docker run -d, and then we are going to say -p. 27017 is the default port. I'm going to map it to 27017 in the container, and then we are going to set up the environment variables. Let me see what environment variables do we have here. So Mongo admin secret, and then we are going to also add the network. So let's say minus network. So let me first copy this and paste it as is, and then I'm going to say minus network is going to be MongoDB network. Let me see what was my network name. MongoDB network minus network, and then I'll say MongoDB network. This was the name of my network. I also want to make sure that the name of this container is Harry Mongo. So let's run this command, and it says unknown shorthand flag. I think I've made a mistake. So let's see what the problem is. So the thing is, I have not given a space here. I'll have to make sure that I give space here. So let me use my arrow keys and add a space after -d. Okay, so it says unable to find Harry Mongo latest locally. So you'll have to make sure that you are running the correct command, and the name is Harry Mongo. And then we are going to say Mongo. I think the name is Mongo. Let's check. Yeah, it is Mongo. Okay. Now let's press enter, and yes, it should work. So the Mongo latest is not found locally, which means that it is going to pull, and the Docker container is going to run with all these parameters. So it is downloading. We'll wait for this to download, and I'll be coming back soon. Now if I do Docker ps, you can see that this Mongo image is running, and it is running on 27017. Amazing. This is great. Now what we are going to do is we are going to run this Mongo Express container as well. And I'll have to do this with all the environment variables set correctly. So what basically happens is that this container connects to the Mongo container. So we'll have to give all the server, username, password, all the credentials of this Mongo instance to our Mongo Express. This is simply a web application that needs a Docker Mongo database container to run. So let me copy this command, and I'm going to adjust this command, and I'll have to change a lot of things. So let me change all these things. The server is going to be Harry Mongo. I think I named it Harry Mongo. Yes, it was called MongoDB Harry something. Let me check what it was. It was Harry-Mongo. And also I'll have to put the username and password correctly. So let's do it. So here's the command that I prepared. The network is MongoDB network. Name is Harry Express. And then we have port 8081 mapping to 8081, and everything is taken from here. I have filled in the required environment variables. Now I'm going to copy this and I'm going to simply paste it here. So let's copy this and let's paste this command here. Let's press enter. It says invalid format. I'm sure I've made some mistake. So -d network is correct, name is correct, PE. Okay, and Mongo Express. So the problem was I had a space after this backslash. So I'm going to copy this command now and it should work. So it says that the image was not found locally. So it is going to pull the image. So the idea is that we are going to connect this Mongo Express with Mongo on 27017 and we have mapped the ports correctly. Now in order to test this, what I'll do is I'll go to my Linode and I'll grab the IP address of the machine. And after that, I'm going to say :8081. So I'll not use localhost, but I'll use the IP of my Linode machine. And you can see it is asking for the username and password. So if you run docker logs and the ID of the container, so you can do docker ps, then docker logs, you can copy this ID and you can paste it. And after you do this, you can get the admin and password here. You can always change it in your config.js. This is what it recommends. But again, we are testing it. So admin and pass, if I'm not wrong, admin and pass is the password. Let's click sign in. And yes, we are inside this Mongo Express container. We can access it. We can create a database. Let's create a database named Harry. Let's click on create database and let's view this database. We can always create a collection. We can say Shubham is the name of the collection, or I should come up with a better name maybe. So I'll say books that this person reads, and we are going to say it is going to be an array. So or let's go with string. Let's go with string. I'll say Shubham reads book 1, book 2, and you can play around with it. Okay. So I want to actually insert, I don't want to find, I want to insert a new document. So you can always insert a new document. You know how MongoDB works. So this particular Mongo Express container is talking to the Mongo container in real time. It is able to access this Mongo container. Now the thing is that if you have say 10 containers or 20 containers, how do you manage those many containers? Let us say you come up with a service which has 24 containers. How will you individually manage all those containers? Can't we have a single command which can bring up all these containers? And a single command that can bring down these containers, and also we can configure and have granular control over a particular container. Let us say container 14 needs container 7 for it to run properly. How do we ensure that container 17 runs after container 4 or container 4 runs after container 8? That is where Docker Compose comes into picture. So now we are going to see how we can use Docker Compose and we can basically automate all this stuff. So Docker Compose basically consists of a YAML file which has the configuration of which container to run when. So now we had two commands which were to spin the two containers that we have. The first command that we used was this one, which basically created our MongoDB on 27017, and the other was to create Mongo Express container. So let me quickly copy the Mongo command, and the below command was for Mongo Express. So what we want to do now is map all these commands to our Docker Compose file. Now I'm going to copy this and I'm going to open this particular folder in VS Code, and let's close this folder. So I'll say don't save, and let me create a file commands.txt just so that I have all these commands saved. And yeah, I can actually paste all these commands now. So this was to create the Harry Mongo container, and this was to create Harry Express container. Okay, so if I talk about the basic commands of Docker Compose, these commands are some of the key commands that you are going to use while using Docker Compose. The first command is Docker Compose up. This will bring all the containers that you have defined in your Docker Compose YAML file. It will bring all the containers up. It will register all the environment variables, and all the tasks that you have defined in your compose.yaml will be taken care of. So let's create this compose.yaml. So compose.yaml, and I'm going to create this compose.yaml very soon. But before that, let's see the command. The Docker Compose down will bring down all the containers. In a matter of seconds, you will simply destroy all the containers. And at the same time, you can bring them up again by running Docker Compose up. So you can take care of a particular heavy service which uses a lot of Docker containers just by using one command. And then we have Docker Compose logs, just in case you want to see all the logs, what's happening inside your containers. You can always do that by running this command, Docker Compose logs. And then we have Docker Compose PS, and this will list all the services along with their current status. Okay, so now the task for us to create the compose file will first include the version. So the very first thing that we want to add is version, which is 3.8. Now this is not strictly imposed, but it is always recommended that you put the version, just so that if somebody is using your compose file, say years down the line, it should work. Okay, now we are going to say services. This defines how many services and what services we have. Now the first service we have is the Mongo, which is going to be a container, and we are going to define everything about this container. We'll say we are going to use the Mongo image, so we'll say image Mongo, and then we'll say the container name, container underscore name, is going to be Harry-Mongo. You can always refer to this documentation if you want to get the reference and what to include and what not to include. Now the compose file can contain a lot of key value pairs, but again, you need to understand the basic ones, the key ones that you're going to use. And over the period of time, if you're using Docker Compose a lot, you will learn the others as well. So first service that we want to spin up is the Mongo, and the other one is Mongo Express. So we'll say Mongo Express. Now if you go to the documentation, the hub documentation of these containers, you'll see that this image documentation contains a sample compose file which will help you a lot. So let's search for the compose file. So we have this Mongo image, Mongo restart always, and the environment variable is also there. So I'm going to reference this and I'm going to simply create my compose file. So as you can see, I have created my compose file and I have entered everything here. I've entered the ports, the networks, the Mongo Express. Once again, you need to understand that this is a YAML file and the indentation is very, very important. Indentation is very strict. If you mess up with the indentation, it is not going to work. We have the server, admin username, password and everything set up as well. So let me do one thing. I'm going to stop all these containers that are running here. Let me log into my machine once again. And now I'm going to simply say Docker PS. So let's stop all these containers. So let's say Docker stop this. And now if I say Docker PS, we have only one container running. And also if you go to this URL, it is not going to work, and it is going to say that the MongoDB is not working. Let me see which container I've stopped. Okay, I've stopped this container, so it is anyway not going to work. And we are going to do the same thing for Docker stop B3CC, this container. Now if I do Docker PS, none of the containers is running, which means that we don't have anything running. And if I refresh this, it is anyway not going to work. Okay. Now, how do I run this file? It's very easy. It's as easy as copying this file and creating a file. Let's say vim, and I'm going to say, let me create a directory first, mkdir, and let's say compose demo and cd compose demo vim compose.yaml, and I'm going to paste everything here. And let's say Docker compose up. Now the attribute version, it says is obsolete and it will be ignored. So I should have not used it. But again, let me say Docker PS, and we have no containers up. And let me say Docker network ls, and we have all these networks up. I'm going to say Docker network rm and this ID, and I've removed this network. Docker network ls, and I'll remove this network as well. We want to make sure that everything is working from scratch. Docker network and rm and this ID, and now Docker network ps will ls, Docker network ls will return only the default networks. So we'll say Docker system prune so that all the images and cache files are deleted. And now if I say Docker compose up, it should be able to spin up my containers. And now as you can see, I have all the logs coming in from different containers. It is also showing me which log is coming out of which container, which makes it really very convenient for me to debug. And let's see if this URL is now working. Now if I refresh, it is working. Can I create a database named Rohan? I should be able to do that. Yes, I am able to do that. And I'll show you something. In my Docker Compose file, I have put the environment variable. If something goes wrong, it is going to always restart. This is the port mapping. This is the network. Then we have image in the Mongo Express container. The container name should always restart. And then we have the environment variables. We have the ports. And can you see this depends on? Yes, this is how we basically define which containers it depends on. So it depends on the Mongo container, and then we have the networks, and that's it. So this is how we basically create a compose YAML file. This version is obsolete, so we'll have to get rid of this. And this was the basic of Docker Compose. I really hope that you liked this video and you were able to get your hands dirty with Docker Compose. Go ahead, explore the documentation, and you are going to love Docker Compose once you deploy a working app with it. Once again, guys, if you are looking to follow along this guide, make sure that you create the VPS exactly like I have done it. For that, you can grab the link in the description and you will get $100 60-day credit upon signing up for a new Akamai account. So make sure you go to the description, grab this link and create your account to claim your $100 60-day credit. And this is valid for new customers only. Thank you so much, guys, for watching this video, and I will see you next time.